Well, let's move on to education. We have a national crisis in education, and every state is affected by it. When we get the NAEP scores, they're not good. When we look at the standing of American students vis-a-vis most of the world, most of the developed world, they're not good. When we think about what COVID did in what's called now learning loss from COVID. Your schools were open relatively soon, but for the country as a whole, we may be losing a whole generation of kids who are never going to quite catch up. But you have been in Florida at the lead edge of education reform, school choice, but also education reform more broadly with the Teachers' Bill of Rights. And so can you talk a little bit about the education space?
Oh, yeah. So we've done a lot. So one, just in terms of the classroom experience, we got rid of the smartphones in the classroom. It's been very important.
Was that a revolution? I mean, did that cause a revolution?
So it's interesting. I was like, one of the first to really push this. And, I think the New York Times said that was an example of fascism to take away the phone. Now everyone's doing it, right? I think they even said they want to do it in California now. So yeah. So part of it is the students. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the last decade hasn't been great, because I think a lot of this with being on text, social media, and all that stuff. So we've done that. But I think it's also good for teachers. Who wants to dedicate their life to sitting in front of a group of kids that all have their face buried in the phone? I mean, and so our Teacher Bill of Rights was basically like, you have a right to be there where the kids are paying attention, where they're not distracted by these devices. You also have a right to have an orderly classroom. And if somebody's disruptive, you have a right to discipline the students. And so I think that's important, because we want teaching to be something that people wants to do. We have tackled this issue of these school unions, these teacher unions. And when I was doing COVID, I said every kid needs to be in school in person. And the teacher union sued me, and they tried to keep the kids out. This is like May or June of 2020, very early on in COVID. And we won that, but they literally would do these demonstrations where they're bringing coffins and putting the coffins in front of our Florida Department of Education building. COVID, these kids were at very low risk for COVID. And so it was all just hysteria, but they did not want those kids in the classroom. And I think that helped really turn public opinion against these teacher unions. And the reality is, anytime you have something like that in a school, it can create, the incentives aren't aligned, because a union is going to defend its members. So if there's a conflict between what's best for the members and what's best for the students, they are duty bound to prefer the members' interests over the student interests. So that's always been a problem. But I think what's happened in more recent years is these unions have become very partisan, and they've really tried to impose a political agenda. You go look at the National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, look at their national conferences. Some of the resolutions they are adopting have nothing to do with education. It's like validating every far left, whatever the flavor of the day is, they're doing it. Well, that's not their role to indoctrinate. The goal is to educate. So we beat them on COVID. We beat them by doing universal school choice. So in Florida, the money follows the student. You can go to your local public school. A lot of times in the school district, you have choice to go anywhere else in your county in that system. You can go to a charter school, which is public but not run by the school district or influenced by the school unions, or you can do private scholarship. And so we're the most robust in the country on that. We're proud of that. But we also did something, because what we saw is a lot of these teachers, a lot of them weren't even political, but they didn't want their money going. Most of the dues, they go to political activism. So we did paycheck protection for teacher union dues, no automatic deduction of dues. So if they want to write a check and hand it, then that's up to them. And in Florida, our Constitution actually has school unions in the Constitution, because quite frankly, I don't think that you should have them, period. But it is what it is. So we did that reform, and guess what? The number of teachers signing up has plummeted. And so now in major areas like Miami and Fort, the school unions are going to be decertified. So that has really shifted power to parents and to students away from the school unions. And I mean, me looking at California from afar, You know, when I was growing up, and certainly before that, post-World War II, California was probably the best schools in the country, certainly top 5. Like year after year, for decades, California was. Now they're typically ranked in the bottom 5. And how does that happen? And I think it's because the California Teacher Union runs this state. They dictate who gets elected. They dictate policy. They dictate all that. And I think the results have been really disastrous. Final thing I'll say we've done on K-12, which I think is important, is when I was going to school, guidance counselors, everyone, you got to go to college. You got to get that 4-year degree. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful in this world. And that was well-intentioned, but it wasn't true, right? I think it's great to have great universities. I mean, there are people, parents that would, you know, sacrifice a lot to have their kid be able to go to school like Stanford. We've got some great universities in Florida that we're very proud of, and they serve an important purpose. But that's not attending a 4-year traditional brick and ivy university is not the only way that you can be successful. And for many people, it's not the best way. So we've expanded technical education, vocational education. We've doubled apprenticeships. Now you go to like the Space Coast of Florida. We're graduating students who know like about aviation and stuff. And they're going out from high school working for Elon Musk at SpaceX. We've got folks that go and work in other parts of those industries. So what happens is no debt and really gainful employment if you have the right skills. And I also think it's like, you know, as you look at like what is artificial intelligence going to do to the workforce, you know, there's a lot of people that say, oh, it's going to take so many millions of jobs. We're going to have to put everyone on universal basic income even, which I don't think is like necessarily would be healthy for society. But if you look at where people are projecting those job losses, you know, it's going to be someone who was like in accounting or some of these other things. Honestly, I think a lot of the skilled labor, I think you probably will be using AI to enhance what they're already doing. So it may not be as big of a problem for them. It may even enhance a lot of what they're doing. So I think having those pathways, and not saying you have to do one or the other, but just letting people know, you know, if you go in one of these pathways, you're not any less than somebody that went to a 4-year university, especially if that person goes to a 4-year university, takes out $100,000 in loans, and ends up with a degree in zombie studies. That doesn't make them better than you, okay?
Zombie studies, I'm not sure we have that at Stanford, but I'll check.